As a child and teenager, I was your typical, not very sporty type. Despite participating in cross-country, I never earned any awards or respect from my peers in athletics. My grades were average because I believed I had average intelligence and motivation. I had an ordinary number of friends, both male and female, and lived in a standard house with my family. Even my name, Common Joe Johnson, reflected my unexceptional nature. None of us, not even my family, could have anticipated that someone as average as me would have two revelations. But it happened. The first came when I was 14. I came across an article discussing the stark differences between genius and utter incompetence. It featured Bobby Fischer, arguably America's greatest chess grandmaster, and suddenly, I became intrigued by chess. Despite always considering myself of average intelligence, I discovered I was actually quite sharp and intuitive when it came to the game. I devoured everything I could find on chess strategy and joined the school chess club. I started competing in local tournaments, first with my junior school, then at a summer camp. Long story short, by the time I turned 18 and reached senior year in high school, I was truly exceptional. In fact, I was so skilled at chess that I earned a scholarship to college. Most people probably aren't aware that there are several dozen colleges in the United States offering full chess scholarships. So, despite my grades hovering just above average, chess helped me excel in certain subjects, particularly math. I secured a full scholarship to a respectable college. Believe it or not, there are indeed chess fans out there, or something akin to that. My fame in my hometown, thanks to my prowess in chess, even led to some girls from school and nearby areas getting to know me. One of these encounters, just a few months after my 18th birthday, sparked my second revelation. Her name was Denise, and she attended the local Catholic girls' school. She wasn't particularly stunning, much like any of the chess fans I'd encountered. Yet, she wasn't unattractive either. In fact, what caught my attention were her incredibly beautiful legs, which I noticed during a gymnastics competition at the same camp where I taught chess the summer before her senior year. Although I took a liking to her during camp, I refrained from making a move until the school year began. Throughout the academic term, I found myself in situations with Denise that seemed planned. As I debated whether to reciprocate her attention, my hormones began to stir. Over the next few weeks, or perhaps months, my voice deepened, and my appearance subtly changed. During a Saturday's away rapid chess tournament, Denise coincidentally found herself nearby after my easy victory. I didn't even have to play the final match. She kindly offered me a ride home, which I accepted, informing my coach and companions that I'd see them on Monday. During the ride back, Denise's flirtation escalated, including a playful gesture of lifting her skirt almost to her underwear as she drove. As I mentioned, her legs were quite striking. Later that evening, I agreed to pick her up for a movie date, and we shared a sweet kiss before parting ways. I hoped it might be a lucky night, but it exceeded my expectations. When I arrived at Denise's house, she was dressed more provocatively than I anticipated for a movie. That's when I learned her parents wouldn't be home for at least 4 hours. Without delay, she kissed me, and the chemistry was immediate. Although I was a maid, it was clear Denise was not. Before long, we found ourselves undressed once again. To cut a long story short, that evening marked my first lovemaking experience. Despite her efforts to reignite the passion for a second round, I fell short. Nonetheless, we enjoyed some carnal pillow talk, and I discovered a newfound pleasure in caressing and kissing her. When I left Denise's house 3.5 hours later, she extracted a promise from me that we would meet again. The most fervent promise I had ever made in my life. While Denise assured me that I'd fulfilled her with the same fervor and curiosity I'd previously reserved for chess, I resolved to become an unparalleled lover. Ultimately, I realized that my relationship with Denise wouldn't last long-term. I knew I'd be competing with more conventionally attractive men. Therefore, I needed an advantage. When Denise hailed me as the ultimate mating god and unabashedly declared that, despite seeing other men, I was far superior, I knew I had to aim higher. I began seeking new opportunities. Denise and I didn't truly love each other. Despite engaging in mating almost 3 times a week, we lacked emotional connection. She wanted to continue our casual arrangement into college, but fortunately her parents wouldn't fund her education, unlike my scholarship. Thus, we parted ways at summer's end. During my college years, Denise and I only occasionally dated during summer breaks. Although our time together was enjoyable and she deemed me even more skilled than in high school, I was already seeking a committed, loving relationship. I was disappointed by the lack of female chess enthusiasts in college. Moreover, competition for attractive partners was fierce, particularly as I didn't fit the typical stud stereotype. Despite lacking prominent muscles, top-tier looks, wealth, or irresistible charm, I compensated with determination and ambition. Although I had my fair share of satisfying lovemaking experiences during my first 2 college years, the women I engaged with weren't exceptionally beautiful, nor did they flaunt our liaisons. While many hoped for our relationship to continue, I became increasingly interested in finding a girlfriend or potential wife, rather than a casual fling. Towards the end of my junior year, I decided to execute a plan I had been preparing for months. The woman I desired, Dolores, was incredibly attractive. Despite doubts about my chances given her other suitors, I believed impressing her with my lovemaking prowess was my best shot. However, Dolores had a friend and sorority sister named Bernice, who was more accessible and gossipy. Though not as unattainably attractive as Dolores, Bernice caught my attention. We crossed paths through mutual friends and shared classes during my junior year's first semester. Fortune smiled upon me when I encountered Bernice at an outdoor party, embroiled in a public spat with her intoxicated date. Sensing an opportunity, I intervened, offered her a ride home, which she accepted gratefully. In her drunken state, she repeatedly bumped into me on the way to the car. In line with her uninhibited demeanor, fueled by drinks, she broached several provocative subjects during our journey to her apartment. One topic stood out, catching me off guard. It went something like this. "Remember that girl who mentioned your remarkable hidden talents? Was she exaggerating, or are you truly exceptional?" "I'm not sure who you mean," I replied with a smile, genuinely surprised as I didn't recall any of my acquaintances discussing me with other girls, maybe Melissa or Miranda or someone similar. She was heavily intoxicated at a party where I stumbled upon her berating a guy for not being even a fraction as good as Joe Johnson. "Perhaps it was another Joe Johnson," I suggested with a broad, toothy grin, piquing her interest. To cut a long story short, I demonstrated my abilities to Bernice that night before she drifted off. The next day, Bernice showed up at my dorm room, essentially booting out my neighbor. In her laid-back style, she stated, "We had quite a night before I fell asleep. Or was it a dream? Seems like there's something there." I smiled. "I'm curious if it's real. Can you come over tomorrow night and repeat it while I'm sober?" "I'm not sure, Bernice. I like you, but I'm not looking for a serious relationship, and I don't want any misconceptions. Plus, if I decide to date one of your sorority sisters, I don't want you getting attached or her rejecting me because of our encounter." "Listen, dummy," she scoffed. "I'm not interested in a relationship either, and I won't stand in your way if you pursue one of my sisters. I just want to see if sober mating with you matches up to my foggy memory." "What time should I come over tomorrow?" I asked with a wide grin. "At 8 o'clock, but I have a test the next day, so you'll have to leave by 10 if you last that long." She chuckled devilishly. The following day, I rushed to complete my schoolwork, grabbed an early dinner, and did some language exercises. This was my chance to catch Dolores's attention, and I didn't want to miss it. I arrived at Bernice's at 8 o'clock in the evening. When she greeted me, I took charge, passionately kissing her, ensuring she noticed my muscular tongue over 8.5 centimeters long with a pointed tip, and swept her into the bedroom. I approached with intensity, not bothering to undress her or myself. I exerted myself as I had never before. Afterward, I held her close, then dressed, left her a note, and departed. Despite it not aligning perfectly with my plan, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. She was as supportive and appreciative a partner as I've ever had. The next day, while chatting with friends in the student union, Bernice approached looking disheveled and agitated, walking on her tiptoes, an unusual sight. She dismissed the 3 friends I was with and settled next to me. "Thanks to you, I failed my world history test today," she began, her tone far from cheerful. "Did she say something similar last night?" I inquired. "I mentioned I needed to study for my test, but you still persisted." "No, damn it, I couldn't stop," she replied. "By the way, mating with you is quite something." Bernice smiled, then chuckled. "When can we do it again? Friday or Saturday night, just not when I have classes the next morning." "Why not both Friday and Saturday?" I suggested. Bernice pondered for a moment. "Friday for sure, and I'll try to rearrange my plans for Saturday." I crashed at her place one Friday night and discovered that given the right conditions, it takes me about 5 hours to recharge. So I ended up getting carnal not only on Friday night, but also early Saturday morning. Thankfully, I didn't have much to do on Saturday during the day, as I needed to catch up on sleep to recover and prep for Saturday night, which pretty much mirrored Friday night until around 3 o'clock Sunday morning. We had to call it quits eventually. In the following week, I noticed more smiles from attractive women when I passed by on breaks or during class than I ever had before. and among them was Dolores. After 3 more lengthy sessions with Bernice over 3 weekends and continued attention from women across campus, we had a serious talk before another Friday rendezvous. We sat down on a bench in a secluded area of campus. "Joe, I have something to tell you that you might not like. Since I've been so preoccupied with our physical relationship, I'm managing to get multiple B's this semester for the first time." "Have you never received a B in college?" I inquired, quite surprised. I knew Bernice was intelligent, but considering her personality and love-making activities, I never imagined she would make the dean's honor list. College is beside the point. I've never gotten a B in my entire life. Despite my promiscuity, I'm a dedicated student and aim to graduate with honors, so I need to dial it back with you. I'm just a session or 2 away from graduating while I'm working on improving my grades in world history and astronomy. Astronomy was known as one of the toughest subjects in the School of Liberal Arts. I was surprised she even took it, let alone planned to ace it. "Now that we're being honest, Bernice, let me tell you what I want. I want a relationship with Dolores McHugh. I want you to help set us up. If you do this, I'll gladly go on 2 more dates with you because that's all there'll be before the end of the semester, at a time and place of your choosing. Otherwise, we're finished, right now." "You're quite the little extortionist," she chuckled. "Not extortion, just negotiation," I smirked. 5 days later, Bernice and I reconvened on the same bench. "You've really thrown a wrench in my life, idiot," she grumbled, though by now I knew her well enough to recognize the grumble as fake. "Like this?" I teased. "I set you up with a date with Dolores at the cost of my conscience and pride. That's the deal." She snorted again. "How do I not understand?" I quipped, this time with a grin. "I stirred up trouble between her and that idiot football player she's dating. Told her that you've worn me out so much that if she wants to let loose and just have fantastic mating, she should go on a date with you. How do I suddenly ask her out on a date out of nowhere? I'm even nervous about it. I took care of that too. Told her I had plans with you at an off-campus dance party on Saturday night, and that we agreed you'd pick me up at the sorority house. I mentioned that when you arrived, I'd stage a family emergency. She'll be nearby, and if you look disappointed, she'll offer to go in my place. I even got you tickets to the dance party." "You're unbelievable," Bernice said with a grin, pulling out 2 tickets from her bag. I pocketed the tickets and gave her a passionate kiss. "Let me know when you're ready to be swept off your feet, and I'll make it happen." I grinned. "You've already made my days, but I just want 2 more 2-hour sessions at most with you. I'll give you the dates, and you'll show up even if you have plans with Dolores. Agreed?" "Agreed," she laughed. The initial phase of the date with Dolores proceeded smoothly. Bernice skillfully unfolded a narrative about family concerns, and I feigned sympathy as she became emotional. Meanwhile, Dolores walked by, looking impeccably groomed despite her relaxed outfit. Bernice intervened to help her, and I inquired if Dolores intended to leave, expressing concern about wasting pricey tickets. Dolores agreed to stay, but mentioned the need to change. In a mere 4 minutes, she reappeared, dressed flawlessly for the dance party. During our journey to the dance, Dolores and I engaged in pleasant conversation. She was not only delightful to talk to, but also stunningly attractive and captivating like no other woman I'd seen. The dance itself was enjoyable. Both of us were skilled dancers, and we encountered acquaintances. Despite not drinking much, Dolores appeared somewhat tipsy. Upon leaving, I suspected her tipsiness was an act, a suspicion confirmed on our return to campus. Dolores undid her seatbelt and leaned towards me. "Joe, you wouldn't exploit a vulnerable, intoxicated girl, would you?" she slurred. "No, Dolores. Plus, even if I were inclined, logistics wouldn't allow it with our dorms," I reassured her. "Thankfully, you're not boring," she slurred even more. "Because Bernice left town on family business and gave me her apartment key. Can we swing by briefly so I can feed her cat?" I knew Bernice didn't own a cat. "Of course," I agreed, and promptly drove to Bernice's place. Dolores struggled with the key, unable to insert it, and eventually handed it to me, saying, "Try it. I'm too drunk." I opened the door, and she wandered around calling for the non-existent cat until she accidentally bumped into me. Seizing the moment, I kissed her, which she reciprocated. "I'm helpless. I can't resist you. Please don't take advantage," she murmured, clearly inviting me. Lifting her up while she continued kissing me, I gently placed her on Bernice's bed, which was thoughtfully prepared with clean sheets for the occasion. I proceeded to remove her underwear without any resistance. In the peaceful aftermath, while we lay together on Bernice's bed, a realization struck me. It had been the most satisfying lovemaking experience of my life. Upon reaching her sister's residence, before getting out of the car, she turned to me and expressed that it had been the best lovemaking experience of her life. She also mentioned her genuine fondness for me and wondered if there was potential for a relationship. I responded affirmatively with a playful grin. I might have continued with playful comparisons, but she interrupted me, indicating she understood my sentiments. She then mentioned picking her up at 7 on Tuesday evening for a student concert and hinted at the possibility of more, before giggling and closing the door. As the car door shut, she waved and hurried up the steps of the women's house, suggesting she might have overheard my confirmation. Things went remarkably well with Dolores, surpassing my expectations. By the time summer arrived, we had engaged in closeness in 10 different locations on campus, spent 3 nights in motel rooms, and an additional night at Bernice's apartment. I remained devoted solely to Dolores, fulfilling my promise to Bernice for 2 more encounters before college graduation. Expressing gratitude to Bernice, I wholeheartedly engaged in both occasions, despite feeling guilty for straying from Dolores, even though we hadn't committed to exclusivity. Bernice's success was evident as she graduated as the top student of the School of Arts and Sciences. In appreciation, I gifted her a Mont Blanc pen in an engraved holder with a message thanking her for her intelligence, selflessness, and allure. Upon receiving the gift, Bernice became emotional, shedding tears and embracing me. Wiping away a tear, she inquired about the likelihood of future encounters given her proximity while I was with Dolores. With a grin, I assured her it was unlikely but promised to always remember her. Chuckling, she kissed me and departed to meet her parents for the summer. Throughout my 3rd and 4th years, I remained exclusive to Dolores. I spent 2 weekends at Dolores's lavish mansion while her parents were in Europe, and she visited my parents' modest home once, necessitating a motel stay for privacy. During my senior year, I declined a chess scholarship and worked part-time, accumulating enough funds from summer jobs and winning professional chess tournaments to easily cover my senior year's tuition. This financial stability was also facilitated by renting an apartment with Dolores, funded by her parents, while I shared food expenses and covered most of our social outings. It wasn't until visiting Dolores's parents' mansion that I realized their considerable wealth. Despite lavishing Dolores with material possessions, her parents lacked emotional involvement in her life, visiting only once during our senior year, prompting me to hide my belongings during their brief stay. Introducing me as her boyfriend, they remained distant towards me. However, their aloofness was the only issue during Dolores's senior year. In fact, our closeness and affection for each other only deepened. We professed our love daily and enjoyed carnal moments nearly every day outside her menstrual cycle, spending almost every weekend in pure bliss. There were a couple of minor issues. Firstly, she had a tendency to splurge her parents' money on clothes, cosmetics, spa treatments, and whatever else she desired. Secondly, if she indulged in drinks, she would often boast to her friends, sometimes in my presence, about my prowess in bed. I hoped she wouldn't do the latter, as it would imply to them why a goddess like her would be with a guy like me, who she might consider out of her league in terms of looks. When I brought this up with her, she reassured me that wasn't the case. However, this led to many of her friends giving me curious or cautious looks, which made me uncomfortable. The natural progression of our relationship led to our wedding, which took place 2 months after we graduated from university, having both secured decent jobs in the same city. It was a simple civil ceremony since her parents declined to participate, viewing me as beneath her, particularly because I wasn't extremely wealthy and she rejected their attempts to set her up with affluent suitors. At least her brothers attended the reception. Anthony was a wonderful person, while Jonathan appeared to be troubled by the event. Dolores acknowledged that forming a strong emotional connection with her parents was never a priority for her. Despite this, she recognized the difficulty of relinquishing the comforts and luxuries provided by their wealth, especially after they stopped supporting us financially following our marriage. Just before the wedding, she mentioned she could handle it, shrugging off the concerns. She remarked that I already possessed a decade's worth of fashionable clothes, to which I concurred, stating that I didn't require anything additional. In response, she sighed and chuckled, adding that she intended to spend a lot of time unclothed. The beginning of our married life was joyful. Over the first 3 years, our careers progressed as expected. We upgraded from an apartment to a townhouse and built a good social circle. We stayed active, with me running and lifting weights while she frequented the gym. Surprisingly, our carnal life improved even more, although our indulgent days reduced to once a month from our college frequency of once a week. Dolores reconnected with Jane Britton, her debut party companion at 18, who encouraged her to join the local junior league, known for its charitable work. However, in our city, Most members were affluent women or had incredibly wealthy spouses, with Dolores and a few others being exceptions. A significant portion were trophy wives much younger than their affluent husbands. Surrounded by such opulence, especially during fundraisers at various mansions, Dolores developed a newfound appreciation for material possessions. She began overspending, exhausting almost all our earnings. When she started dipping into our modest savings, we had our first major argument. Although it was a heated disagreement, neither of us held on to any resentment. After one of our all-day indulgent sessions, during which she was particularly energetic and responsive, we quickly returned to normal. Later that week, she surprised me with an unexpected proposition. "Joe, I realize I can't spend our money recklessly, and I'm genuinely committed to slowing down. However, my 2 junior league friends truly value my company and are willing to cover expenses for our outings to New York, spa treatments, and other activities. I wanted to inform you about this so that you don't think I'm acting irresponsibly by joining them on these excursions." "What do they expect in return?" was my incredulous response. "They simply value my friendship. Is it really that hard to grasp?" she said in a sweet tone, moving closer to me and planting quick, soft kisses on my neck, cheeks, and lips. "No, I also appreciate your openness. It means a lot. But what about their husbands? Won't they have concerns about their wives spending money on you?" Jane and Amy's husbands are incredibly wealthy and are willing to indulge their wives in any way they desire. This is not a concern for them. What they spend on me is inconsequential in their eyes. After reflecting on it, I realized this was indeed true. Through my interactions with Jane and Amy at Junior League and other social events, I knew their husbands held them in high regard, with both spouses ranking among the top 200 richest Americans. "All right, no need to worry," I responded with a shrug. Following our conversation, money ceased to be a problem. However, something else changed. We began to socialize more with Jane and Amy, sometimes with their husbands and sometimes without. Jane and Amy began to flirt with me in earnest, which became increasingly revealing and uncomfortable, particularly with Amy. In some ways, Amy embodied the quintessential trophy wife. At 29, she surpassed any fashion model in beauty, exuding both regal elegance and approachable warmth. Married to Wilton Braxton, a septuagenarian ranked 35th among America's wealthiest individuals, Amy was the epitome of glamour. She was the only woman I'd ever seen who outshone Dolores in appearance, and she maintained her looks with unwavering dedication, including rigorous workouts with a personal trainer 5 days a week. Moreover, Amy was the most charitable person I'd encountered, tirelessly fundraising for causes like supporting battered women, alleviating child poverty, and aiding children with serious illnesses. When not engaged in exercise, socializing, shopping, or attending resort retreats, Amy dedicated herself tirelessly and energetically to charitable endeavors. If a fundraiser fell short on funds, Wilton Braxton readily made up the difference, seemingly finding joy in Amy's happiness. After a particularly flirtatious encounter with Amy at a mansion during a social event, during which she feigned intoxication, I knew it was time to discuss the situation with Dolores. The following day, after a pleasant brunch and an enjoyable morning of closeness, I sat Dolores down on our patio. "Darling, there's a sensitive matter I need to discuss with you." "What is it, dear?" she asked, smiling. "I'll be straightforward. Amy Braxton and Jane Britton seem to be making advances toward me whenever they get the chance. You've heard some of their comments yourself." "You must feel flattered," Dolores replied with a grin. "Well, maybe not entirely flattered," she continued, her grin turning mischievous. "Considering Amy's husband isn't satisfying her in the bedroom and Jane's husband isn't much better. I'm sure they're simply enjoying your company." "Do you discuss their bed lives with them?" I asked, puzzled. "Of course. Wealthy women always discuss their bed lives." "Do you discuss ours with them?" I hesitantly queried. "Yes. I've shared with them how you fulfill me in ways no other man can," she said, noticing my discomfort. "Do you divulge everything?" she teased. "Almost," she giggled, sensing my unease. "What about their reaction?" "They're eager for details. They envy me," Dolores grinned. "I wish you wouldn't do this," I stammered. "Why not? They keep it between us. Are you intoxicated when discussing our bed life?" "Sometimes. But often, especially during sober outings like spa trips or shopping, they live vicariously through me. And I'm happy to indulge them since they sponsor my activities," she answered, without embarrassment. Seeing my distress and noticing my clenched hands, she approached, sat on my lap, and kissed me. "I wish you wouldn't do that again," I said between kisses. "On one hand, I don't want to offend them. But on the other, I'm only human. You know, they're very attractive. Of course I understand, dear. In fact, Amy is probably the most stunning woman I've ever seen. And Jane isn't far behind, but I trust you can handle this. With that, she knelt down for the second time in as many weeks. I imagined it was Amy. And surprisingly, during mating, I imagined it was someone else for the first time since meeting Dolores. After that, Amy and Jane's flirtation only intensified. Some of Amy's comments, even in front of Dolores, were quite risque. Dolores simply smiled while I perspired. One Friday evening, the situation reached a critical point. Dolores and I were supposed to meet Amy and Wilton after work to attend the opening of a play downtown. But when I arrived, only Amy was there. She greeted me with an overly familiar hug. Shortly after, my phone rang. It was Dolores. "Honey, bad news. My brother Anthony's wife just called and said he was in an accident. It's not life-threatening, but she needs help with the children. I'm so upset I'll miss the performance. I can't refuse them." "Sorry to hear that, dear. How long will you be away?" I inquired, aware that Anthony and his family lived just one suburb away. "I hope it's only a few hours, but I'll really miss it." "Me too, Dolores. I'll call you to let you know when I'll be back this evening. Listen, my love, if Amy or Wilton are there, will you give them the phone?" "Okay. I love you," I responded, handing the phone to Amy. Amy and Dolores conversed for a while, with Amy expressing sentiments like, "We'll miss you. I understand, and we'll take care of him." Shortly after, Amy returned my cell phone and hers rang. After a brief conversation, during which she seemed disappointed, she passed the phone to me. "This is Wilton, Joe." "Hello, Wilton. How are you?" I cautiously greeted. "Listen, Joe, a very important business deal just came up, and I have to take my private jet to Paris within the hour. I won't be back until Sunday evening. I'm really sorry I'll miss the show, but Amy really wants to go, so please join her and then go to dinner at my expense." I'd been through this scenario once before when Bernice set me up with Dolores. My suspicions were raised, but there was nothing I could do. Before we entered the theater, Amy noticed a couple of disappointed students at the box office who apparently had no idea that the opening night tickets would sell out, or how much they would cost, even if they managed to stay. She paused, planting a kiss on my cheek before approaching the young man and woman. After chatting with them briefly, she handed them 2 tickets, and it seemed they were overwhelmed with gratitude. As the excited college kids followed us into the theater, I whispered to Amy, expressing how she had undoubtedly made their evening, if not their month or year. In response, she grinned and tightly squeezed my biceps, remarking that she could do the same for me. I blushed, acknowledging her words with a shy smile. The evening felt surreal, almost as if it belonged to another realm. Despite the excellent acting, Amy's continuous physical contact with me proved distracting. Even more so was the interaction with the 2 college students Amy invited over during intermission. After introductions, the girl inquired if I was Amy's husband, to which Amy replied on my behalf, stating that I was her lover, winking at me mischievously. The young man's reaction to this caused him to spit out his drink, which Amy had poured for him, through his nose. Thankfully, we all shared a laugh, and I swiftly changed the subject. Throughout dinner, Amy persistently ran her foot up and down my leg and occasionally rested her hand on my thigh. It was evident she had consumed quite a few drinks as her speech began to slur. I barely touched my food, attempting to keep the conversation light. After dinner, as I drove Amy home, she appeared to pass out. When we arrived, she was giggling and almost incoherent. I rang the doorbell of her mansion, but there was no answer. Eventually, I managed to wake Amy up. "Amy, no one is answering the door at your house." "The maid has the day off today," she slurred with glassy eyes. "Got a key?" I queried. "Right here," she giggled, passing me her clutch. In her small clutch, I quickly located the key, assisted her out of the car, and physically carried her to the front door, a task not without its challenges. Ascending the 10 steps from the circular driveway to the ornate entryway, I propped her against the front wall, unlocked the door, and ushered her inside. Leading the way, I supported her as she stumbled behind me. Suddenly, she straightened up, closed the door, and leaned against it. Extracting her mobile phone, she pressed a button, her expression unexpectedly content. "What's up?" I inquired. "Your wife's about to call," Amy said with a mischievous grin. At that instant, my phone rang, and I turned away from Amy to answer the call. "Hi, honey," Dolores greeted. "Anthony's wife asked me to stay until Sunday evening because they really needed me. I hope you don't mind. I wish I could chat longer, but there's so much commotion here. Love you, and can't wait for Sunday." Then she abruptly ended the call without acknowledging my requests to wait or my questions. "What's the deal?" I turned back to Amy to find her standing undressed except for her high heels and a necklace of rubies and diamonds. Her allure and sensuality left me breathless. "What?" That was the only foolish thing I managed to say apart from a sigh. Amy approached me, pressing her magnificent chest against my chest and wrapping her arms around my neck. "I'm sorry you're in the dark, Joe, but Dolores orchestrated it all. She set everything up." Confused, but beginning to understand, I muttered, "And Wilton?" "Wilton's known since we got married that he can't fulfill me in bed. But as long as the guy is married, approved by him, and we're discreet, he doesn't mind my extracurricular activities. He gave the green light for you, as his call to you showed." "I see." My eyes widened, and I was rendered speechless as I gazed into Amy's mesmerizing azure eyes. "You're not going to be the first guy in my life to turn me down, are you, Joe?" she asked rhetorically before slipping her tongue into my mouth. While we kissed fervently, a flurry of thoughts raced through my mind in no particular order. It was all arranged by Dolores, likely to cover the costs of those lavish shopping trips and spa treatments. I'm just a man. How can I refuse the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life, who is also cheerful and philanthropic? I must be in Bizarro's world. This doesn't happen on Earth in real life. When our kiss broke, Amy whispered, "Let's go upstairs. I have other plans." I chuckled in response. With that, I spun her around, accidentally knocking off one of her Christian Louboutin heels. I carried her into the living room, later sprawled out on the luxurious sofa, and then proceeded with the full treatment. While Amy lay deliriously on the sofa, I scooped her up and ascended the stairs until I found a room that I was confident was one of many guest rooms. I laid her on the bed, locked the door, and quickly undressed. After a quick dinner that Amy prepared herself, as there was no household staff in sight, we parted ways on Sunday evening around 6:30. My goal had been achieved. She could hardly walk straight. I had never felt better in my life, not even after the most satisfying encounters with Dolores. This troubled me deeply. "We'll keep in touch," were Amy's parting words. Chuckling, I exited her front door and drove home, my mind in turmoil the entire way. Contemplating the purpose behind recent events and concerns about potential repercussions on my relationship with Dolores, I parked on the street due to her car blocking the garage entrance. Quietly entering our townhouse through the side door, I inadvertently overheard Dolores engaged in a jovial conversation on the phone. Opting to remain silent, I listened in as she giggled happily. It became apparent that she was speaking with someone who had previously doubted her, but now acknowledged her success in orchestrating something. After a few minutes, I discreetly exited through the side door and then re-entered noisily through the front. Reuniting with Dolores proved unexpectedly smooth and pleasant. She embraced me warmly, showering my neck, cheeks, and lips with rapid kisses, her face illuminated by a constant smile. During our interaction, I learned that Anthony's situation wasn't serious, that she was pleased I enjoyed the play, and that she hoped Amy had a good time. She didn't inquire about my whereabouts, and I refrained from offering explanations. On Tuesday, Amy called me at work to express her appreciation. She sounded cheerful and suggested meeting next week to discuss arranging another encounter. In response, I grinned. We shared a laugh before hanging up. Despite my euphoric rendezvous with Amy, clearly endorsed by Dolores and Wilton, I remained apprehensive about what the future held. Over the next 2 weeks, I attempted to broach the topic with Dolores. Her response was always to please me or steer the conversation toward other forms of closeness. Our bed life remained intense as ever, but my inner turmoil persisted, even after 2 more encounters with Amy over the following month, though not as extensive as that hedonistic weekend. However, in public, Amy ceased her overt flirtation, always maintaining a pleasant demeanor. Jane began to pester me, even in Dolores's presence, and I could foresee where it was heading. I remained caught in a state of internal conflict, despite Dolores's efforts to avoid any discussion or confrontation on the matter. I harbored doubts about whether Dolores truly loved me, despite her unprecedented affection, kindness, and attentiveness. I questioned whether everything was as genuine as it appeared, along with various other uncertainties, which began to impact my work. Then, by chance, I found myself in the yard, unaware of Dolores's presence. While in the basement attending to some tasks, the landline rang, displaying Amy's name on the caller ID. Curiosity overcame any qualms about intruding on Dolores and Amy's privacy. I waited until I heard Dolores answer upstairs before picking up the phone in the basement. simultaneously muting the microphone. While I can't recall the exact conversation, what resonated clearly was Dolores's genuine love for me and her pride in having something that other members of the social circle lacked, a husband who consistently satisfied her physically. She took pride in this aspect, seemingly unbothered by the idea of sharing me with her closest friends, knowing they lacked the same satisfaction due to their spouses. Dolores didn't express concerns about me leaving her for another woman, confident in our mutual love. Following that phone call, my torment essentially ceased, and I bore my burden steadfastly. 3 years have elapsed since that conversation, marking the end of my inner turmoil. While I complied with Dolores's wishes, I remained firm in my stance against her having a love-making relationship with another man. Although I never explicitly discussed this with Dolores, I made it clear to Amy and Jane that I wouldn't condone Dolores taking a lover. I'm certain they conveyed this to Dolores. As their conversations revealed, they shared everything. I began to see it as a duty, akin to servitude, as did Jane. Though not as physically attractive as Dolores or Amy, Jane possessed a strong libido, focusing primarily on love-making gratification with less emphasis on closeness or playfulness. Our bi-weekly encounters with Jane were relatively brief and straightforward. Conversely, the nearly weekly sessions with Amy proved more complex, despite my efforts to suppress them. I developed genuine feelings for Amy, although I couldn't discern whether her affection for me matched mine for her. Nonetheless, her vibrant and playful demeanor lifted my spirits like no other. With Wilton's declining health, I pondered the implications of his potential passing. I lacked answers, and the situation grew more intricate as Dolores was now 8 months pregnant.